How you doing today? Today we're going to do a little bit of a routine maintenance item. We have a Pontiac, an 07 Pontiac G5, and we're going to check the rear brakes. The owner of the car is not having any problems with them. We're just doing routine inspection, make sure that nothing's worn out and that everything's going to function properly for the next year or so. Okay, so I usually refer to this as a brake service. Okay, we've got the car sitting here now. It's still on the ground. Before we jack it up, we're going to crack the wheel nuts loose so that there's no chance that the thing's going to fall off when we're reefing on the wheel nuts when it's up in the air. Okay. Also, it's a lot easier for the wheel nut to be turning when it's already on the ground. So, all right. So we're going to start off just loosening off the. Well, in this case, the hubcap is just held on with some plastic screws. Nothing of any significance there. Simple as that, no big deal. Next we're going to crack these loose. And we'll do the same on the other side before we lift the car. Okay, so I think you've seen the still picture of where the jack was positioned. On this car, it's very convenient. You can jack the whole back end up in one shot if you've got a floor jack like this. When we were doing the front brakes earlier, there's no real good jacking point on the front on this model, so we had to jack one side at a time and do one side at a time instead of doing both in the same shot. So if you have the luxury of a floor jack, this is a nice, convenient place to jack it. We're always using safety stands whenever you lift a car up off the ground. Do not trust these concrete blocks or the jack itself, because it could fail. It could come down on top of you. And, unfortunately, there's almost always somebody who ends up crushed. At least once a year, somebody gets crushed into their car working on just a jack. So don't trust simply a jack. If you're not familiar already, most cars, this pinch rail, as they call it, is where the jack normally goes if you have to change a jack, change a tire at the side of the road. It's the best place for your safety stand as well. Okay, now this car has not had an overabundance of maintenance, but even though we got the wheel nuts off, we can't get the wheel to just pop off like it should. So we get our handy dandy rubber mallet and beat this tar out of it. Oh, that was better than I feared. Alright. When you're done getting the wheel off, as an extra safety measure and to keep it out of your way, it's not a bad idea to put the tire underneath the rocker panel. So God forbid it falls on the tire, not on the ground. Okay. Good safety habit to get into, and like I said, it keeps it out of your way when you're trying to work. Okay. Okay, now in theory, the brake drum should just pull straight off at this point. Okay, but again, it hasn't had a lot of maintenance, and there's a fair bit of rust built up around the center here, which makes that drum really tight to get off. So we're going to use a hammer. We're going to beat on the drum to try to loosen it to get it to come off. Now, in case you miss swing and you end up clipping the wheel studs, you're going to damage the threads. So I just put the wheel nuts on loose, just to protect the threads in case I end up accidentally hitting it. I'll hit the nut instead of the threads. Okay. Best place to hit it is right here on the flat surface. That way, if you're at all lucky, it will start to come loose. Now it has shifted. I can feel that because the drum suddenly got tighter to turn. So it means the drum is cocked out a little bit one way or the other. It's starting to move a little bit. If you can see right down along the edge here, the rust is starting to break free. You can see there's some movement there, right? Oh, sorry, my hand was in the way. Is that better? You can see that there is in fact movement now between the drum and the center. So with some luck, we should be able to get this off now. There's quite the buildup of rust around that center hub. It may stop the drum from sliding off. Oh, not bad, we got it. Okay, normal brake dust inside there. That's quite normal. Okay, let's give it a little knock and it ends up contaminating our environment. If you take a look at the brake shoes now, okay, these are not bad considering the mileage on the car. This is not bad at all. Probably got a few months or even maybe a year left depending on how much you drive. Okay, but certainly it would justify taking another look in 6 months or so to make sure that they're not worn out. If you wish, for usually about 20 or 30 bucks, you can get a new set of brake shoes and deal with it all in one shot. All right, we're not going to do that today. I know this lady doesn't drive much. It'll probably be good for at least another year for her. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to dismantle the brakes, clean them up, and lubricate the moving parts so that we won't have any problems in the future. Okay. Now there's a retaining spring that holds the shoes to the backing plate here. On a lot of cars, it's just simply, you've probably seen one of these before, it's just a little coil spring that you push in and turn. This uses a different style. It uses like a great big horseshoe clip, and it keeps the shoes in. There's another spring in here which is used for the adjusting mechanism, so we're going to start by taking that off. Okay, so we use a very thin blade screwdriver, catch the spring just underneath, pull it out from the shoe, okay, and it goes on there. It's a good idea because these are kind of complicated as far as there's a lot of moving parts and it's easy to forget where everything goes. So it's a good habit to get into. Do one side at a time so that you can compare this side with the other side. Often they're just mirror images of each other. With the advent of digital cameras, taking a couple of pictures as they go along makes it easier when you're trying to put it back together again, to remember where everything goes. Okay, so we'll take off that spring. Make sure we don't lose anything by putting it in a little container like that. Okay. This little adjuster arm is now free. This part in between is the brake adjuster. Okay. Now we have this big return spring. Let's see if we can get that out of there. Okay. Okay, so that's all there that holds it in. And at the bottom there's a clip. Okay, we need to. Okay, let's not lose this part. Okay, so there is the combination return spring that brings the shoes back when you take your feet off the brake, and because of the kind of twist in it, it also holds the shoes up against the backing plate. Okay, all the bits and pieces fell off as you saw, I'm sure. This is your brake adjuster. These often seize, and when they do, the brake shoes cannot move out towards the drum as they wear out, and you'll lose rear braking power. This one, as you can see, still moves freely. Okay. It's good to note that one side of these is a right-hand thread and one side's a left-hand thread. Okay, so everything should move freely. Their brake shoe. One of them, you notice, is still attached to the parking brake arm. You can leave it on there. It's a little bit of a nuisance to change these if you need to replace the brake shoes. There's a clip here that you need to take off to get the. Oh, actually, I suspect on this brand it looks like that's permanently attached. Usually there's a clip that holds that arm to the shoe, so I would suspect that when you buy your new shoes it comes with a new arm already attached. Okay? I may be mistaken on that. I've not had a lot of experience with these Pontiacs. Okay, so that's fine. Now this part here is your wheel cylinder. When you step on your brake pedal, hydraulic pressure comes in and pushes them apart. Okay, you want to make sure that they move freely. Okay, I'm pushing them back in as I'm wiggling them back and forth. If that sticks, if it seizes up, you have to replace it, which involves opening up the hydraulic system and bleeding it all afterwards. In this case, it's moving nice and freely. That's great. It's a good idea to take a peek under the rubber cap. Make sure there's no fluid showing there. Any fluid in there, it's got to be replaced. Okay. and they're not expensive. So basically all we're looking for in this car is to clean things up and put it back together again. Okay. We have a few issues. Brake dust is one that we'd like to clean all the brake dust out. We've got 3 contact points on each brake shoe where the brake shoe touches the backing plate. Okay. And that's going to contact these 3 points here. Okay. So that's what actually holds, when the shoe's up against it, it's going to be touching in those 3 places. Sometimes, especially as the cars get quite old, those contact points get quite rough. There's actually a groove starts to develop there, and the groove will interfere with how smoothly the brakes apply and release. So if yours is badly grooved, you may need to file it down or grind it down a little bit. Be careful on these newer cars, there's not much metal there, so don't go crazy with the grinder. You just want to smooth it out a little bit, and then we're going to be putting some anti-seize grease on those points to allow them to slip more freely in the future. This one's not bad. You can see there is rusting, so we're going to get that cleaned up properly. Okay. So we have used a scraper here to remove the buildup of rust. Okay. A piece of sandpaper. We'll just clean it up a little bit more. Make sure you didn't miss anything. Some people like to repaint the backing plate at this point. To be honest, I don't think there's much point in that, at least not on these little contact points, because the paint's just going to be worn off anyways as the brake shoe rubs back and forth across it. But definitely I would use the anti-seize grease on these points because it acts both as a lubricant and as an anti-rust agent, so it'll stop it from getting any worse. So these are pretty good now. So what we're going to do next is we're going to use some brake cleaner and clean away any of the brake dust that's left in here. Okay. There's all kinds of brands available. It's not very expensive, $4 or $5 a can here in Canada. I think it's a little cheaper in the States actually. But just get rid of any of the dust. It's an alcohol-based cleaner, so it's self-drying. Okay. It'll be evaporated in no time. Another point that's not pertinent so much on this car, but on a lot of cars you'll actually see there's a double ridge here, and that the backing plate actually goes in between the 2 ridges. And then the buildup of rust around here can cause a scraping noise as the drum is turning. Okay, so if you have one that's got the double ridge, you might clean the rust out of there. Okay, again, a very simple little bit of a tap with the hammer will get rid of 99% of the rust on the edge there. There we go. Okay, that gets rid of most of it. Most of my experiences with Toyotas and Toyota use those double ridged drums all the time. Okay, GM obviously doesn't on this case. So we just make sure that any points where the drum and the backing plate come into contact with each other are cleaned up of any major scale or rust. Okay. Finally, now we get out the anti-seize I was speaking of. Okay. I really like this copper slip brand, but it's almost empty. We'll put it on the contact points reasonably sparingly. You don't want a whole lot of grease floating around inside your brakes. This is not normal grease by any means. It's a very high temperature grease. It's good to like 2,000 degrees before it starts to melt. Don't be using anything other than this anti-seize grease on these contact points. Don't try using regular axle grease or something. You'll have nothing but problems after that. Okay. If you wish to put a little bit in here between the wheel cylinder where it contacts the shoes, you can do that. But honestly, that doesn't make too much difference anyways. Okay. So there we go. So that part is now taken care of. Next we're going to service the brake shoes. Okay, very important fact, we got to make sure that this park brake arm is moving freely, that it's not binding at all. Okay, this one is. When you're replacing these, and if you have a model where that clip comes off, good idea to put a little dab of anti-seize grease on that point to make it move freely. Okay, so we look at the brake surface here, and you see there's quite a bit of material left. there's plenty for this lady for at least the next year or so. But there's like a glaze on the surface. It gets very, very smooth over time, and as it does, the ability of the brake shoe to grab the drum is reduced, and you have to brake harder, which tends to wear your pads faster, your shoes faster, beg your pardon. So again, it sounds kind of counterproductive, but actually taking sandpaper to the brake shoes and removing that glaze will increase the lifespan of the brake shoe, as well as increase its efficiency with grabbing. You don't have to go nuts. It doesn't take much pressure to clean this. There we go. We got the majority of that off. Okay, so you can see how the color's changed now to a much more grayish color. Now I shouldn't actually be touching the brake shoe with my fingers. If there's grease on it, you'll be contaminating it. So, the good final rule of thumb is to give it a little rinse off with some brake cleaner. Okay. My hands aren't greasy, but if they were, that would be a bit of a problem. Likewise with the other brake shoe, let's get the glazing cleaned off that. There we go. Okay, so now it's ready pretty much for reinstallation. Okay. Next, we're going to turn our attention to the brake adjuster. Okay, like I said, this is often a left and right thread situation. One side is left thread, one side's a right thread. Okay, these are in actually quite good shape. They turn very freely. Okay, we're just going to back it out. Okay, give it a little wash off. Make sure the threads inside are nice and clean. Okay, inspect the little teeth here, make sure they're not worn at all. It's not something you would expect on a newer car like this, but maybe when they're getting older they would be. Okay, we'll let that dry for a few seconds. Okay. We're going to once again use anti-seize grease on the threads and on the end here where it turns internally into that thread. Doesn't take a lot, again, just a little bit. Okay. And this is to ensure that over the next year or two this does not get seized up again. On this design, I wouldn't expect a problem. On some brands, this is not open all the way through, and if you get too much grease in there, it actually binds. So you want to put just enough that it can turn freely, wrong side, but not so much that it's going to interfere with its ability to retract all the way. Okay, so we're going to screw that thread all the way on. And later on, when we adjust the brakes, we'll be bringing it back out again. There we go. So that's seated properly. Got a little bit of excess here. Big gobs of grease on it. If there is, give it a wash off with your anti-seize grease. Okay. So now we can start the reassembly process. First thing we want to do is put our brake shoe in position. Okay. That goes in the notch at the top, and that one sits there. Okay. If you had the other style that I was referring to, you would put on one spring and hold it in place. Okay. This one doesn't use that style of brake. Okay. So we'll just set that in place if it'll stay. Okay. That's where the second one's going to go. Like that. Okay. Oops. Let me turn this here. Okay. It sits inside the bracket. That sits inside the bracket. Okay, and the tops go inside the wheel cylinder. Okay, a little bit clumsy if you have a second person with you, it's really handy. Okay. This spring holds it in and holds it together. So we'll put it in here. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, before we do the final assembly, we've got to put this adjuster in place. Okay, you'll notice that there's 2 notches on this side and only 1 on that side. One of those notches is for the little adjuster arm. The adjuster arm goes on like that. The adjuster goes in so that the big notch goes around the parking brake arm, and the small notch is on the adjuster. You see how that little arm is going to be touching that little gear? And that little arm is going to turn that gear. Okay? Alright, so again, the second pair of hands is often very helpful in a place like this. Okay. So the one side of the spring is in, the bottom is in, and now the tricky part is getting this all to go together and getting this other spring in position, the other end of this big spring in position. I'm going to put that down for a second. Okay, since we just paused there, you maybe noticed I switched it around. We put the spring in the back one first. I think that'll work a little easier. I'm sure the experienced GM mechanics have already found that out. Okay, make sure everything's all lined up. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you see the return spring is now in position. It's pulled the shoes in. It's pushing that wheel cylinder in all the way. Okay, I should point out you got to be a little bit careful. You don't push that wheel cylinder right through. If you push this side too far, it'll pop out the other side, and then you'll have a leak. So you don't want that to happen. Okay, so everything's in position now, with the exception of the little spring for the adjuster arm. Okay, the loop end goes on that little hook right there. Okay, and the hook end is going to go into the brake shoe. So we take that. I don't know, can you see that hole down there? Okay, that hook has to go into that hole. And that's it. It's all reassembled. Okay? Again, if you got your mitts all over the brake shoes, give a little shot of brake cleaner. Okay, make sure you've got no grease on the brake shoe in the appropriate places. Okay, should never be any grease on any of the contact surfaces where the pads and shoes come together. Okay, now I pointed out earlier the little adjuster wheel here. Okay, every time you back up and apply the brakes, this little arm is going to try to move, and as the brakes wear out, it's going to move that wheel up a notch. Okay. And that's how the brakes adjust. Every time you back up, that little arm moves that up a notch and attaches and ratchets it out a little bit. Okay, so everything is now in position. That's better. Nope, it's not in position. I goofed. The hook came undone from here. Notice how this is moving like that? Shouldn't be doing that. Okay, the big spring came unhooked from there, so I'm going to have to redo this. That's better. Okay, so the spring's back in properly. It came unhooked here at the base, and that hook at the base is what keeps the pressure pushing the shoes up against the drum, or up against the back plate, beg your pardon. So you can see now there's that movement that we had before is not there. It's nice and tight. Okay, so this side of the equation's all finished. Next we're going to turn our attention to the drum. Similar to the parking brake or to the brake shoes, the drum surface here becomes glazed. Okay, and again, a good piece of coarse sandpaper. You just remove that glazing. Okay, so we've removed the glazing on the surface of the drum. I don't think this is going to show up on the camera very well, but there are very mild grooves in the drum. Totally expected really at this point, and still totally serviceable. Okay, there's nothing really wrong with that. You don't have to panic and run off and buy new drums. Oftentimes, and it is happening on this one too, is there a ridge develops right along the edge here where the shoe does not touch the drum, and that can make getting the drum off in the future a real pain in the tuchus. So carefully not to touch the actual brake surface. If you take a file and remove that ridge, it'll ensure that next time when you go to do your brakes you'll get it off again. GM very nicely on this example, they've actually tapered the drum out a little bit so that won't be much of an issue. It also makes it easy when you're filing it not to accidentally hit the surface that the brake shoes contact. So you can just remove the real excess rust. Metal expands when it rusts, and the edge actually will expand outwards, making it almost impossible to get the shoes or get the drum past the shoes when you're trying to get them off. So just get rid of that. When this car goes in or when the brake shoes are finished and it's time for new brake shoes, almost 100% for sure my recommendation would be to change these drums for new drums as well. Machining drums costs almost as much as replacing them, and to be honest, when you machine the drums you make the drum thinner, which makes it more prone to overheating. Alright, these aren't like the old cars and trucks where they had lots of meat to the drums that you can cut away a whole bunch and not have a problem. There's not much on these. And for the price of replacements, just go for new ones. Okay. Now, if you recall when we started this, we had a bit of a time getting the drum off the center hub here because of rust buildup. So just removing the rust buildup on the inside here will help ensure that we can get that off again in the next time. Okay. And likewise here, there's quite a bit of rust buildup here, so we'll just take that down a little bit. Maybe should have grabbed a flat file, would have been a little easier to get in here. Matter of fact, I have a small flat file here, this should be easier. Again, the goal is just to get rid of the buildup so that in the future we can get that drum off easier. You can see how much scale's coming off there. Just put a bit on this side. Okay, so there we go. We got that cleaned up pretty good. We shouldn't have too much trouble getting that drum off next time. Again, as a little bit of insurance, we'll put some anti-seize grease around the center. Both as a lubricant and as a rust preventative. It shouldn't be so hard to get off next time. So if I'm the guy doing the brake job next time, I'll appreciate the efforts I went through. If somebody else does it, they may never realize, but at least they'll have an easy time when they do the brakes next time. A little bit of anti-seize on the wheel thread, on the lug threads here. I know that there's some controversy in the world today about whether you should be doing this or not. I'm a little bit of an old school guy. I've always done this and never had a problem with the wheel nut coming loose. Just take your time and precautions when you're adjusting it. And I know when I'm on the side of the road in minus 35-degree weather changing a flat tire, I'm going to appreciate the fact that that anti-seize grease is on there. Okay, so now we're ready to put the drum back on. Look how nice that slides on and off. Okay, so it turns freely. Okay. There should be a slight amount of drag between the drum and the shoes, ever so slight. If there isn't, that means when you step on the brake pedal, the pedal's going to go down a lot lower than necessary. So and it may even actually bottom out. So what we're going to do is we're now going to adjust the brakes so that there's a small amount of drag between the shoe and the drum. On a lot of cars, and I believe this one included, there's a rubber plug at the back that you can pop out. It looks like that. Okay. And that's to allow you to access that adjusting wheel from the back, which you can do with a wide blade flat screwdriver or a brake adjusting spoon, as they call it. It's just kind of a curved flat blade screwdriver, nothing fancy. Okay? And the goal is to turn this little adjuster wheel, and each time you turn it, it's going to move the shoes out. Okay. Now I don't think you can see this on the camera, but at the moment that adjuster is not even touching the shoes. It's not even pushing the shoes yet, so that wouldn't even be good with brand new shoes, much less worn ones. So we're going to need to adjust these out. Okay, so I'm starting to feel that the adjuster has actually touched the shoes now, and it's a little harder to turn. We're going to turn it out a few clicks. Educated guess. See how much they're worn. Okay. Again, it's on, and there isn't really any drag yet. Notice that I'm pushing the drum on all the way and then turning it, so that the drum is nice and true. I think we'll give it an extra couple of turns. Okay, so there's a little bit of resistance there now, okay, which it should be fine. And the beautiful thing about this system is it will self-adjust. If the brake shoes are close to being right, every time you back up, the adjuster will move it another click on that ratchet mechanism, maybe 2, 3, 4 clicks until they're properly adjusted. So they don't have to be perfect. They just got to be just touching, and the automatic system will take care of the rest of it. So before you drive the car any distance, before you give it back to your customer, back up a few dozen times, stepping on the brakes repeatedly. Each time you step on the brakes, it will adjust it. It click a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more until it's in the right position. Okay? So that's how we do the fine tuning on the adjustment. Although I feel this is probably pretty good. You'll also probably notice when you use the handbrake that it's going to come up higher than normal. But again, it'll adjust as you back up each time. If after maybe a dozen or 20 backups it's still not where you want it, the handbrake is still coming too high, maybe you should go back and double check whether you've misadjusted it or not. Okay, and again, you can do that from the back side through that little port. When you're finished, make sure you put your little rubber plug back in, because it will keep the dust and dirt and water out of there. There we go. Okay, so the rubber plug's back in. Now all we gotta do is put the wheel on and go do the other side. So I hope this has been helpful. This is a pretty simple brake. It's very, very common. GMs, Fords, everybody uses the same basic sort of drum brakes. Maybe slightly different method of holding on rather than that big horseshoe clip. Maybe they use a set of the smaller springs, which is probably more common. Just take your time, take some pictures before you start. Match your left side with your right side, compare, make sure you've got everything back in the right place. When you're done, make sure you've cleaned everything, your brake shoes, the brake drum. Wash down the parts with brake cleaner. Be careful not to wash away the grease that you put on the backing plate there, those 3 little spots on either brake shoe. And you should be good for a while after that. Good for another 100,000 clicks or whatever. Alright? So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Okay, so while I was working on the other side, I discovered something that'll make this job a little easier, and I'm sure all the GM mechanics out there were groaning when they were watching me trying to put this together. You notice that I've retaken this apart now, and I've got the big clip in place holding the shoes in, and I got the adjuster separate. Okay, GM very nicely designed this that it just fits beautifully with the shoes already in place. You can put that in there. Saves you holding about 15 different things with both your hands. So if you're trying to do this by yourself, that'll make life much, much easier. Okay, so you can slip that in after the shoes are in place. Then put your little return spring on and do the adjustment we spoke about earlier. So a little edit there for you that hopefully will save you a bit of grief.